The Celtics just blew out the Atlanta Hawks 132-106. Jaylen Brown dropped 41 points in front of his hometown crowd. Sam Hauser hit 10 threes, just one shy of the Celtics' all-time records. We'll talk about all of that in just a moment.
Jaylen Brown with the flush. Tatum the drive. Tatum the finish. It is Baylor 18. The mission commanding is mission accomplished.
So I'm here in Atlanta, where the Celtics have now won 2 games in a row. They blew out the Hawks. From the moment this game started to the moment it ended, this game was pretty much over. There was never really a real push from the Hawks. I honestly commend the Hawks fans for sticking this one out, because Atlanta did not give them much to celebrate in this one. But what really has impressed me is that after dropping the first game of this road trip, the Celtics should not have lost to the Indiana Pacers in the first game of this trip, but they've bounced back now. They came back from down 19 to the Miami Heat, and now they blew out an Atlanta team that's mediocre. I mean, this is not a great team, but this is a mediocre team that has a couple of good players, and normally would put up a little bit more of a fight than they did tonight. And they're 26-15. They have the second best net rating in the NBA. They have the second best record in the Eastern Conference. It is pretty amazing to see at this point, just the success that they're having. And I know we talk about it all the time on the show. On You Got Boston, my idea for this podcast this season was going to be, hey, they might lose a lot of games. I'm going to pull out some positives after each game. Maybe there's going to be some nice development stories, maybe some signs of progress. And instead, we're covering a team that I really do believe is a championship contender. Because at this point, if you're not going to consider any team except for Oklahoma City a championship contender, then that's one thing. But if you are going to consider other teams, I think you have to consider the team that has the second best offense and the second best net rating in the NBA, and one that after starting the year 0-3, they've won 26 of their last 39 games here, right? That math is wrong, but they've been really, really effective. And so to me, as I'm looking at this team in totality, and I'm on this road trip, I'm going to be finishing this one off in Detroit, where they have a really good test against the top team in the Eastern Conference. They're 1-2 against the Pistons, but all 3 games came down to the wire. Like, you have to just appreciate how they respond to tough stretches, right? They drop back-to-back games. You could say, okay, maybe a losing streak is going to amount here. It happens to teams across the league. We saw the Knicks go through a bad stretch. The Cavs, all these teams in the Eastern Conference have gone through real losing slumps. This team hasn't. They've only lost 2 in a row, one since mid-December. And when they lose 2 in a row, they immediately come back and win. It's very much the hallmark of previous iterations of the Celtics. Like, this is a Joe Mazzulla thing, right? Where under his guidance, under his coaching, this team never kind of goes off the rails and goes through like a really bad stretch. And I started thinking in that first quarter of the Miami game, okay, they're about to lose 3 in a row, and now they have the Hawks and they have the Pistons. Like, this could be a little bit of one of those stretches. And once again, they're back on track. I thought this overall was a great effort from them on both ends of the floor tonight. Defensively, they were as crisp as we've seen them. And some of it's Atlanta. Like, you can't look at the game, with just the goggles on one side of the ball. But I do think you saw a lot of things to just appreciate about the way the Celtics team played tonight. And especially like being on a road trip, this is a tough time of year. They're a couple weeks away from the trade deadline. That weighs on people. A couple weeks away from the All-Star break. Like, it's the halfway point to the season. We're 41 games in. So things can start to feel like a little bit like you're going through the motions. You did not see that tonight, just as far as the execution, the effort. Peyton Pritchard sat in this one. You wouldn't have known. Josh Minot and Chris Boucher also did not play. I mean, obviously that they haven't really been in the rotation, so that matters less. But this team was seamless. Baylor Scheierman steps in, starts on behalf of Peyton Pritchard. No problem. Derek White finishes with 12 assists in this one. I didn't even notice, but that's what happens when your teammates are hitting shots. I'll talk about everybody's performances, but I wanted to just start with a big picture view of like, this team is 26-15, right? This team just blew out yet another opponent. Feels like they either are in a close game or they're blowing teams out. Like, that's the sign of a really good team. I don't feel like this team is significantly worse than last year's, which again is just mind-boggling when you think about everything they lost and all the expectations that we had. And I say we on the outside because I don't know that internally that's what this felt like. So that's the first thing I wanted to start with. Second of all, Jaylen Brown has been in a little bit of a shooting slump, nothing massive, but a little bit down from where he was prior to that Clippers game. They had a 4-game homestand. He was a little less efficient. He still finds ways to score the ball, and he's still contributing to winning. And he was, a very common stat line for Jaylen over the past few weeks here has been like 27 points, 7 assists, 7 rebounds. Like, it's great stuff. But in this one, this was one of those games where he could just get to his spot, get where he wanted. He didn't even shoot like tremendously well in this game, but casual 41 points in just 30 minutes of action. So he doesn't even play in the fourth quarter, still has 40 points in front of his home crowd. I asked him after the game, like, he said that he actually usually doesn't like playing at home because there's a lot of distractions, there's like just a lot going on. But as he's gotten older, it's something that he's kind of become more okay with. And you would not have known. I would have thought that he really enjoys playing at home based on how he played tonight in Atlanta in front, just 20 minutes from his hometown of Marietta, Georgia. He got his high school jersey retired on yesterday morning. And then we talked to him at shoot around this morning, and he talked about that process of what it was like to come back to Wheeler High, the high school that he went to. I asked him about his very famous tweet where he tweeted that one of his high school teachers told him that she expected to see him in prison in 5 years. And he told the backstory of that. And I think he was just kind of reminiscing on being back where he grew up, where it all started. And it all resulted in another kind of effortless big time scoring performance. So 41 points for him on 14 of 30 shooting. And the best part of this stat line is he gets to the line 12 times, hits 11 of 12 attempts. He's having the best season he's ever had from the free throw line. So that used to be an area of weakness for him. It's something else that he has really kind of fixed about his game is his inefficiency at the line, which obviously if he's going to clamor to get to the line, he's going to talk about it as much as he has. You want to convert when you're there, and he's done a really good job of that. So again, this has continued to be kind of like a superstar season for Jaylen Brown. And this was another one of those casual nights where it's like, I don't even feel like he played exceptionally well. He could have had 50 in this game, if a couple more shots had fallen. But nevertheless, great to see from him put together this type of performance. And again, you don't want to lose these kinds of games. They lost the Indiana game. They've had a couple losses this year that they wish they could, have back. The Utah Jazz home loss, the Brooklyn Nets home loss, the Blazers on the road. But for the most part, they've really taken care of business against these sub 500 teams. And that's the hallmark of a good team that could put together a playoff run, that can climb up the standings. You don't want to lose these kinds of games. And believe it or not, the year they won the title, one of my first road trips covering this team was Atlanta, because they played against the Hawks 2 games in 4 nights. It was like that. Every year there's one city you go to and you play 2 games in their arena consecutively, and you just spend a little bit of time there. This year was Orlando, last year was Charlotte, but that year was Atlanta. And both games, they were up by 25 and they blew the lead. And that was actually when Joe Mazzulla tore his meniscus. And I think that only came out after they won the title, that I think he went into the boxing ring or MMA, whatever, the sport that he plays, and actually tore his meniscus, in whether it was frustration or processing those blown leads, or maybe it was a little unrelated, but that's the story that he shares. And so being here tonight, even when they were up by 25, I was like, it's not over. I've been in this arena. I've seen them blow leads, but tonight it was foot on the gas. The only time that you saw the cracks was in the fourth quarter, and that was a completely different lineup. You had the two-ways out there. You had Xavier Tillman out there, Baylor, Ugo. So that was more of like a summer league group. That actually was, outside of Xavier Tillman, that was all summer league players. And so I'm not going to read too much into whether or not that group clicked. But yeah, just impressive discipline and focus for the Celtics team. They had a couple of days off in Miami. You never know. But they came out very, very focused in Atlanta tonight. I just want to give a quick shout out to our friends over at PrizePicks. As always, we're very grateful to PrizePicks. This episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. Whether you're starting a new routine or making player picks for the first time, trying something new can be hard. But in life and on PrizePicks, it always feels good to be right. With high-pressure playoff matchups every weekend and elite hoop action almost every night, the action never stops. And PrizePicks lets you take control. It is so simple to use. It is so easy to use. It's so intuitive. If you're missing your fantasy team, my league is already over, but with PrizePicks, I don't have to wait until next year's draft to keep playing fantasy. PrizePicks lets you play fantasy football every week, even in the playoffs. Pick your favorite players and win when their projections hit every week. No draft required. Get in on the action. PrizePicks is now available in all 50 states, including California, Texas, Florida, and Georgia. So no matter where you're listening from. And PrizePicks puts their users first, so all withdrawals are fast and secure. PrizePicks is offering a max discount for CJ Stroud tomorrow. He just needs to throw for more than 0.5 passing yards. So don't miss that. Download the PrizePicks app today and use code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, it's good to be right. So I've somehow gotten to the halfway point of this episode, and I've barely discussed Sam Hauser, who was the man of the hour tonight. He hits 10 threes. At one point, he was 10 of 15 from 3, and I think That's where the stat line should have ended, because the next 6 that he took, a few of those were just kind of off balance heaves, not really heaves, but just shots that he normally would not have taken. And then he said it after the game. He was a little dead. His teammates really wanted to see him get the 3-point record. You don't know, the franchise record for most threes in a game is 11, which you would think it's more. Honestly, I'm surprised it's only 11 considering how many great shooters have played for the Celtics. Marcus Smart holds the record. That's also surprising. You would think it'd be somebody like Ray Allen, or I don't know, even like a Derek White or a Sam Hauser, but it's Marcus Smart that holds that record. Hauser has had a couple of tries at this. This is not the first time that he's gotten really hot, and I thought that he was going to get this one because he had 8 threes at the half, and it just seemed kind of inevitable, and then he just was not able to get going. Sorry, he had 7 threes at the half, but 8 early on in this game. And then he just had nothing left, and he kind of joked about it post-game. It was pretty apparent that he was not going to get the record at some point, and Joe Mazzola pulled him out with plenty of time to spare in the fourth quarter, but his teammates were cracking up on the sideline. They really wanted to see him get this record. I think you go back a couple years ago in DC, he was close to getting it, and then he sprained his ankle. I was at that game. He looked so devastated heading over to the tunnel. He knew it wasn't a serious ankle sprain, but it was like another opportunity where he was on a heater that he just could not get over the hump. And I asked Jaylen Brown, he had a funny answer discussing his observations. He was not playing in the fourth quarter, so he was just watching this heater develop from the sidelines. Here's what he had to say.
You guys on the bench were getting invested in Sam potentially breaking the 3-point record. What was watching that performance like? And then it seems like you guys were kind of laughing when it wasn't happening. What was kind of going on?
It was terrible. I remember when Sam almost had the record when we were in Washington, and he hurt his ankle, and I didn't play that game, and I was in the back, and I was like, bro, you got to get back out there. I need you to get that record. And he was like, oh, it's going to come back to me, da-da-da-da-da. That was 2 years ago. So I'm like, this was his chance. It might not be another 2 years until he gets it. But it was a joy to watch, man. We was all rooting for him. I wanted him to get it, but probably was a little bit too much pressure on him.
So it was funny. You can't see it in the video, but Sam Hauser was standing outside of the scrum while Jaylen was answering, going like this. And he knew he was coming up next to approach the media. And when it was his turn to talk to us, he knew the first question was going to be about his pursuit of the 3-point record that went to the wayside because, there were some ugly misses down the stretch there. And I think it was fitting that he didn't actually get there. But my point in talking about Sam Hauser is not to discuss that he fell short in getting this record, despite the fact that that was kind of a funny subplot of this game. It's that I think this is a guy that routinely is underrated by fans, by the outside, because ultimately he has done exactly what the Celtics have needed from him this year. He has defended. He has accepted a role that sometimes looks like a starting role, which that's most of 2026. He's been a starter. He's been the 5th starter for this team, a position that we all know has fluctuated quite a bit this season. And then he's also come off the bench at times. Sometimes he's gotten more sporadic minutes, hasn't complained. He's okay with whatever. He was asked the other night. He literally said, to be honest with you, I don't care if I start or I come off the bench. Like, it just doesn't matter for him. And so Hauser, 5th-year vet on this team, is one of the more veteran players, obviously a part of the championship team. I think a lot of people wanted to see him make a leap this year because a lot of other guys were stepping into bigger roles. But one of the things that I realized, everybody wanted Derek, Peyton, Sam. Everybody thought that their numbers were going to skyrocket, at least one of those guys. And honestly, nobody's really have between those 3. And that's because the system hasn't warranted Hauser taking way more shots or Derek going more ISO. It's just naturally this offense has become historically ranked. So we don't need to scrutinize why hasn't Hauser taken a massive step up in his production, because that's not what this team has needed. And honestly, he's shooting 39% from 3 on the season. Once again, he's going to hit that 40% mark that he hits every year. Last year, I interviewed his mom, Stephanie, and she said he was in a slump earlier last year, and she said, you just keep shooting. Eventually it's going to come around. And you're going to hit 40% again because he does every year. He did it in college every year. He did it in the NBA every year. And so that part of his game, you're not going to always have a good shooting game. That's the life of a shooter. There's nobody that is exempt from a slump. Even the greatest shooters in NBA history, Steph Curry finds himself in shooting slumps. But Hauser is kind of coming out of his. Entering tonight, he was shooting 42%. From 3 this month. So you're seeing the tides kind of begin to turn. He's been shooting even better as a starter than as a bench player. Maybe that's part of kind of giving him a little bit of flow and confidence. And so this night was no surprise. I was actually going to drop a Sam Hauser story before this game, and I ended up just not finishing it in time. But it was about how he's having an underrated season. And so it was fitting that he finished with 30 points, was a plus 30 in this one. And yeah, it should have been 10 to 15 from three. That was the true numbers. And the last 6 were attempts to go for the record, which maybe just weren't rewarded by the basketball gods. But there's that piece. There's also the defensive side, which Joe Mazzulla said it last week. He is one of the better defenders on this team. And the thing that he's really good about is the actual kind of like reading the game plan, studying the opponent, studying the scouts, studying tendencies. He's not the quickest guy. He's not the guy that can jump the highest on this team, but he might be one of the most prepared guys when it comes to the defensive game plan. And so that continues to stand out. He's in the top 2 percentile when it comes to not fouling shooters or not fouling the guy you're guarding. So he doesn't foul. Like when he is defending somebody, he will force them into tough shots. Sometimes they'll make them, but he's not going to put you on the line. He's in the top 2% in the entire NBA at that. So I continue to defend him. I continue to maintain that he is having an underrated season. And I think it's just because of the nature of the season. Like there's been all the hype around Jaylen Brown for his MVP candidacy, first team All NBA, like the leap that he's taken. Then there's been all the hype around the young guys, right? Ugo, Josh, Baylor, and like, where does Sam fall now? He's 28. Like there's not this like sky high ceiling for him. You can't make up these lofty expectations. Like he is just kind of who he is. And so I think with that comes a level of like, Sam Hauser, like they can do better. Like you don't want to underrate like this quality of being the kind of shooter that he is, because even when he was in a slump, he was commanding so much attention on the floor and opening things up for other guys. So you can't just look at the numbers, right? Like Luka Garza, I think, has the best 3-point shooting percentage on this team, but a lot of that is because he's left open for open looks. Like Sam does not get open threes. Actually, he got a few tonight, which was very unusual, but that's more of a reflection of Atlanta's defense. So again, we'll see how it all pans out. Trade deadline is a couple weeks away. A couple of futures are in the limbo. I think he's one of the guys that like could potentially be dealt, but I hope they keep him around because he has a valuable role that he plays. There are not a lot of guys that can shoot as well as he can, and you're not giving up anything on the defensive end. Like Joe said it, he is one of the better defenders on this team, and that might not match your eye test, but I'm telling you, watch him guard, watch him move his feet. He knows the guy he is guarding so exceptionally well. Like that is his gift. And it's something that he studies and he credits his coaching staff to it. He explained it all to me. Like this is a big process. And so you're kind of seeing the fruits of that labor. And again, tonight was fun because 10 threes is always a good time. This would have been the perfect night for the record, but 11-3 did not drop. The last guy I wanted to mention is Baylor Scheierman. Baylor got the start in place of Peyton Pritchard in this game. Baylor has now started 3 games on the season, 2 in the last week. And it just goes to show, I think Joe Mazzulla is very comfortable slotting him into that 5th starter role if somebody's out of the lineup. Sam Hauser was out recently. Baylor slotted into that role. I think you can see that he has this flashes of an all-around game. I mean, look at the stat line, 9 points, 7 rebounds. He had 3 of his 6 threes, including starting things off with a no-dip 3, which is great because you can get those off with much more ease. I watched him practice those in warm-ups, and then the first 3 that he gets, no dip is like he's not even bringing it back down, right? We've seen Klay Thompson was one of the kind of big revolutionaries of that shot, and more guys are practicing it, including Sam Hauser. I see guys practicing in warm-ups all the time. But Baylor finished with the 9.7 rebounds, 4 assists, 3 steals, 3 turnovers. But you really like some of what he can do with the playmaking. Defensively, I think it's another guy that kind of flies under the radar with what he's able to do on that end of the floor. So he's having a quiet season in the sense that he's not having like a massive offensive explosion. But I mentioned this before, like the thing that stood out to me about the season that Baylor's having is that he pretty much is always in the rotation. Even on a night where he might play 6 minutes. You look at those 6 minutes, he did something positive in those minutes. And Derek White said it, asked him about it last week. He said, you look back at the segments where Baylor's playing, there's always some good stuff happening. And that's why Joe Mazzulla will play randomly like for 3 minutes in the 4th quarter of a close game, because he doesn't feel like he's just conceding something. He feels like Baylor can also give you another ball handler, another playmaker, another guy that can space the floor. Tonight was a good example of that. Peyton Pritchard sidelined for the first time this season. Joe feels very comfortable slotting Baylor into that starting spot. And Anthony Simons, it seems like he's in that Peyton role where no matter who's out, Joe likes him coming off the bench. He came in again with Luka Garza and Ugo Gonzalez. That trio has been great together, and they come in at the midway point of the first quarter, and that normally provides the Celtics a boost rather than a liability. So I think he wants to keep that combo going, and so it's other guys that he's willing to shuffle in and out of the rotation as starters. And so tonight, Baylor starts despite Peyton being sidelined. I don't get the sense that the Peyton injury is anything serious. It's left ankle soreness, so I think it's just like a maintenance rest day for him. But the Celtics will have an opportunity to, you want to be at full strength against the Pistons on Monday night. They are the top team in the Eastern Conference. And I started this podcast saying some crazy things about how I think this team is a real contender and that this is a legitimate team that needs to be thinking about this season, winning now. And obviously, Jason Tatum's future is a big part of that. I do think he's going to come back this year. This is speculation, not reporting, but Jason Tatum is increasingly engaged on the bench. He looks like he's jumping up and down, celebrating. He's taking kind of like fake shots, going through form shooting on the sidelines during quarter breaks. None of that means anything necessarily, but it is also how Kristaps Porzingis used to act when his return was getting closer and closer. And so I started noticing that body language shift. I think Tatum looks a little bit different than he did a couple weeks ago on the bench. Maybe that means nothing, but you heard it here, January 18th. I'm starting to get the sense that he's closer to a return. Again, it's just a feeling. It's not reporting. But certainly that could play a factor in whether this team is capable of making a real run, because he obviously comes in and just makes them better at pretty much everything right away. So that's it for now. Those are my observations from Atlanta, from the State Farm Arena. I'll be heading to Detroit, looking forward to seeing how the Celtics handle that game. That'll be a good test for them. All 3 games so far against the Pistons came down to the wire. This is the 4th and final meeting between the two teams. And if you want to check out more coverage from this game, Jaylen Brown spoke at Shoot-Around about his jersey retirement and a bunch of other funny stories that he had from his high school. He also spoke after the game, so lots of Jaylen Brown content. Sam Hauser spoke after this one. Joe Mazzulla, as always, spoke before and after this one. So all of those press conferences are on CLNS Media. Go check that out, as well as our hour-and-a-half-long Garden Report show in which we discuss this game in depth. So as always, thank you for watching. Let me know in the comment section what stood out to you from this game. What did I miss? I didn't really talk about Anthony Simons. Bobby and I recorded a whole stand-up about him, so you can go check that out as well. But there was a lot to like, obviously, from a game that the Celtics pretty much were blowing this team out the entire game, especially starting in that second quarter. Monster second quarter. For the Celtics, for Jaylen Brown and Sam Hauser, who really kind of took over the game in that one. Thank you as always for watching. We'll have more coverage coming soon from Detroit.